Dr. Walter, what were the circumstances of your first meeting and of your earliest associations with Gustav Mahler?
My first personal meeting with Gustav Mahler took place in 1894 in the Opera House in Hamburg, where I was engaged as a coach. I was 18 years old at that time, but it had already been a long time that I ardently wished to make Mahler's acquaintance, because his first symphony, the one I am going to conduct now, had been performed at a music festival in Weimar, and I had greedily devoured the furious criticisms in German papers of this musical crime against taste, against symphonic form, against every aesthetic rule. It was particularly the third movement, the sardonic funeral march, which aroused the wild hostility of the critics. But just that fact, that a symphony could bring about such passionate repercussions, made me wish with all my heart to hear this revolutionary kind of music, and still more to see, face to face, the demonic creative personality of its composer. And so it was a deeply stirring experience for my youthful mind to see its wish fulfilled and look into Gustav Mahler's face. But before I got acquainted through him with his compositions, I was fortunate enough to see Mahler at work as conductor of the Hamburg Opera. I accompanied his musical rehearsals at the piano. I coached his singers for the operas he conducted. I attended his orchestra rehearsals and his performances. My musical impressions from this incomparable genius on the conductor's platform were equaled by the decisive moral influence his austere example had on me. Musically and morally, these first impressions were decisive for my whole life. I recognized in him, young as I was, not only a musical genius, but an ethical power, an educator, a leader of men.
Your lifelong devotion to Mahler began in those early days at Hamburg.
Yes. And very soon it was not only the conductor, but the composer, under whose influence I came. He played his first symphony for me on the piano, and he also gave me the score of his second symphony, the Resurrection Symphony, which he had completed in that very year, 1894. He felt my understanding, my growing enthusiasm for his work, and to the last years of his life, I always was acquainted with the new works through himself.
Soon after this, Mahler became director of the Vienna Opera, didn't he, Dr. Walter?
Yes. In 1897, he left Hamburg, when the destiny of the famous Vienna court opera was entrusted to his hands. Then followed those 10 years in Vienna, which made history in operatic culture. Through his interpretative genius, not only the musical, but also the dramatic side of operatic performances rose to a level hitherto unknown. In 1901, I was 25 years old. He engaged me as first conductor at the Vienna Opera. And so I was not only a witness of the unforgettable achievements of Mahler, I also could take an active part in Vienna's musical life of that period. After 10 years of his activity of historic importance, Mahler left the Vienna Opera.
That's when he came to this country, isn't it, to conduct the Metropolitan Opera and then 3 seasons with the New York Philharmonic?
Oh, yes, it is.
But you remained in Europe, Dr. Walter.
I continued my work at the Vienna Opera.
Dr. Walter, after 50 years or more, the memory of Gustav Mahler is still a very vital force in you, isn't it?
More and more so. For the way he went as a musician, we must consider also of great human importance. After his first symphony, followed the one in which he confessed his belief in resurrection, and each following work means a step upwards. Although nothing human was alien to him, and although his loving interest belonged to everything on earth that science, art, philosophy, or human relations could offer him, his deepest longing and his vision went beyond the earthly sphere. He had the soul of a mystic, and I believe his work will last, not only because of its tremendous musical importance, but also because it contains a message from those higher spheres for which his soul longed, of which a vision was given to him.
You mean the spiritual message contained in his music?
Yes. You have only to think of the words which he chose for the vocal parts of his works, to find our way to his spiritual message. I cannot do better than point to the fact that the first movement of its 8th symphony contains the hymn Veni Creator Spiritus of Rabanus Maurus, and the second movement, the last scenes of Goethe's Faust, because he chose to express in words of Goethe his hope for an eternal life.
Let me interject for our listeners, Dr. Walter, that the 8th Symphony is going to be performed by the Philharmonic Symphony this spring. Mr. Stokowski will conduct this huge work on the broadcast of Sunday, April 9th. But, Dr. Walter, the permanent influence of Mahler is not restricted to his music alone, is it?
Oh, certainly not. For Mahler was really great. In him was human greatness. Greatness was in his style of life. Greatness in his work. And I am sure those who understand him will feel enriched through all their lives.
Well, certainly, Dr. Walter, no one has done more in his life to advance this understanding of Mahler than you. And your remarks today, I think, will help more people to discover in Mahler's music the depth of meaning it's always held for you. Thank you very much for recording these words with me.